Ole Miss lands a massive commitment from Landon Barnes. This is an elite one, folks. We'll talk about that with Dalin Flowers. This is a Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and Landon Barnes committed to Ole Miss over Ohio State and Washington. We're going to talk to Dalin Flowers, who is from Texas. He is familiar with Duncanville, but the thing that just pops into my head over and over is Ole Miss with Isaiah Williams committing from the state of Florida, and Ole Miss with Landon Barnes committing from Duncanville High School in Texas. They have recreated what they had with Princely Amon-Mielen and Suntarine Perkins. That is a major thing. And here's Dalin Flowers. I was just talking about how they basically recreated the Princely Amon-Mielen and Suntarine Perkins in Isaiah Williams and Landon Barnes. This commitment is massive.
It is, man. It's absolutely huge. I love that comparison. One of my favorite things to watch this Ole Miss defense do was get in those third down situations and Suntarine Perkins and Preston Mamiel and just rushing those edges and getting to the quarterback with ease. So that comparison is great between Landon and his counterpart out there in Florida. This is huge for Ole Miss. To out-battle Washington, Ohio State to get Landon Barnes is absolutely huge. And to see the rise of recruiting from the states of Texas and Florida is absolutely huge as well for Ole Miss. Pete Golden sat out what he wanted. You know, these are guys that fit his scheme, that fit Randall Joyner's type of play style and what they want to do at Ole Miss and what makes them successful. And it's huge. It speaks to volumes of what Randall Joyner is able to do as a recruiter and what Pete Golden is also able to do as a recruiter. But this binds into what they've seen in terms of recruits and transfer guys into what Ole Miss has done over the last few years. This is not just a quick overnight thing. Pete Golding and Randall Joyner have developed something great in the front six at Ole Miss, and players now see they have the ability to come to this school and develop, be one of the best in the country, and as well make it to the NFL now. And that speaks volumes because this is a guy, Landon Barnes, coming from Duncanville High School. And if you're not familiar with Duncanville, Reginald Samples has developed one of the top high schools in Texas and in the country over the last decade. And even before Reginald was there, Duncanville was still known for being one of the best high schools in the country. They've developed some really five-star guys that are in the NFL now. Keelan Russell, who is the freshman five-star quarterback at Alabama, was at Duncanville. A few different guys, Colin Simmons, who's a five-star at Texas as well. Duncanville has produced five-star talent guys over the years. And so Landon Barnes, four-star guy, 6'4", 245, absolutely huge to put on the map for Ole Miss. And as well, get the excitement and positive momentum moving forward for the 2026 recruiting class, because Ole Miss, this is just them getting started with these two commitments, and they're going to continue to build on what they already have and moving forward what they think they need to get to continue building for what 2026 can be for the future for Ole Miss.
Yeah, and this will not be it for Ole Miss this
Right.
week. This is going to be a very big week for Ole Miss, and it starts with an absolutely elite pass rusher. We had the Florida football scout, Brian Smith, the Locked On recruiting expert on the show each and every week. And he basically said that Duncanville is probably one of the better, if not the best, program in high school football all across America. They have something going on there. They really do. Now, if you look at his rankings, just to prove that I am not making it up, he's rated as a top 100 recruit according to On3. He is rated number 195 according to 247, 242 according to ESPN, and 154 according to Rivals. I don't know what Rivals and On3 is going to look like tomorrow, but this ranking actually holds water. This is an elite pass rusher. One thing that is pretty interesting for this player is I don't know what to think about that stance. I mean, you see a lot of Princely Amon-Mielen in his game, but that is a squat, nose guard, 4-point stance that he gets in on the side. I guess that's a Duncanville thing.
It is definitely. Duncanville has developed to be one of the more aggressive teams in the state of Texas in the country. They have always had a reliant and dominant defensive line, guys that, are kind of old school type players that really just put their nose down and just get to the quarterback with ease and develop that type of aggression that builds the momentum and builds the ability for them to be great at the Division 1 level in college and then to be great in the NFL as well. I think this stance gives him the variety to do a lot of different things on the field as well. Like he can play on the edge as you're seeing him right here, but you can also move him in. You can play him in different positions on the defensive line. His ability to use his hands as strong as they are to kind of move defenders and get in the backfield and make those tackles on the quarterback or the running back in the backfield is going to be huge for Ole Miss. And Landon Barnes' big play ability is going to make Ole Miss something to be really watched out for in that defensive front in 2026.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I think about there's a bunch of kids that Ole Miss is going head to head with Ohio State for, and Ohio State versus the SEC, I'm not having that fight. They recruit really, really well, and they're going up against Ohio State for Deuce Geralds. They went up against him for Landon Barnes. There's a wide receiver from Indiana that they're going up against Ohio State. Whenever you are in that company to where Ohio State is in the recruiting stratosphere, it shows how far Ole Miss has grown, honestly.
Absolutely. It's one thing in today's game to just be, a good football team, but Ole Miss has now become a great product. This is a team that is social media eyes are on them, the fandom eyes are on them, recruits eyes are on Ole Miss at all times. People now know what the Ole Miss brand is about. This is a team that can develop guys, that can put them in the league, they can get great media deals, et cetera, et cetera. Ole Miss is now a national brand. This is not a, a 2.0 team anymore. This is not a below the shadows, franchise anymore. Ole Miss is here to stay and continue to develop with the top teams in the country. This is not something when Lane Kiffin signed on, 5 years ago, that he was like, this is going to be, one of the low tier places I'm going to come. This is going to be a second tier job. No, Ole Miss had the ability to be at the top with the best in the country. And he's able to do that with his staff, with his confidence, with his players, and he's able to produce those things. But, it's funny, going back to Pete Golding, when we got this guy a few years ago, it was the Alabama fan base that were so happy that Pete Golding was gone. And, Alabama fans were just so glad that Pete Golding was gone. And the things that he's been able to do since he's been in Oxford have just been remarkable. And the buy-in that he's been able to get from players, whether that's high school guys, transfer player guys that were still here before he was here, he has developed a great system. He has developed a great overall family oriented relationship with these players, and Randall Joyner as well. They just have great relationship with their players. Former players like Princely and Walter Nolan speak very highly about the two, and it really bends into what the player-coach relationship needs to be if you want to be a great recruiter at this level, which Ole Miss has done tremendously.
Honestly, when we come back, we are going to talk about what Randall Joyner has done and look at some of the Mississippi prospects. Is one about to pop? And then we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow's show. And of course, this is a live stream. So if you want to put a comment in the chat, if you have a good question, we'll do our best to answer that as well. But be sure and stick around for that. I want to tell you right now about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I tell you what, one thing, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about the baseball under the lights, golf on the greens, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get back in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and even regular season games feel like must-watch events. You can currently get Austin Simmons at 30 plus 3,300 to win the Heisman Trophy. That's 33-1. Ole Miss is currently a 37.5-point favorite over the Georgia State Panthers in the season opener, if that is your flavor. If you're new to FanDuel, that's okay. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Really, really good stuff indeed. I'm pretty fired up about where this can end up. All right, Dalin, it's really interesting. This is the first time I've done a live stream since my surgery.
Mhm.
So if it's a little bit wonky and everything, I apologize for that. It will be better by the start of the season. But I wanted to do a live stream for this event because Randall Joyner is doing work in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just absolutely doing work. Pete Golding is leaning on the recruiters that are really good on his staff. Lane Kiffin has done a good job of putting together recruiters on this staff. And if you see with the Billy Glasscocks and all of the people from the state of Texas that are in the player personnel department, you had to get somebody in Duncanville. You had to get somebody from there.
Yeah, it speaks to volumes of what the understanding of this program is about now. I think when you're in the proximity of those schools, like Texas and Florida, where Mississippi currently is located, you have to attack those places. Even if you feel like you don't have the chance to get or compete with some of these other schools, you have to attack those places. But with the totality of simply winning, but also understanding the format, the formation, and having true development and consistency. You don't see too many guys nowadays, defensive line coaches, defensive coordinators being at schools for too long nowadays, whether that's they're going to another school, they're getting the opportunity to go to the NFL and coach. So seeing the consistency, the Pete Golding being here for a few years, Randall Joyner being here for a few years has really binded and developed the great relationship that they have to recruit guys from different states like Texas and Florida, but also build those relationships so they have guys from Texas, Florida, California, those other states. And then those relationships and other players see that from those areas, and they want to see what they can do at Ole Miss, how they can fit in Ole Miss, what's the Ole Miss relationship and family like, and it's huge. Randall Joyner has done a fantastic job at not only recruiting, but helping players buy into the product at Ole Miss, which is absolutely huge. I think Randall and Pete have developed a great relationship, and one of the things that has stood out to me, I don't know if you saw this, but the fireside chat that Pete Golding had with Chris Beard, if you haven't seen that, check it out. It was really great. But Pete said that he was really excited about the front six this year. He doesn't expect much of a drop off this year, and that speaks on the volumes of what they were able to do in the recruiting portal last year, what they were able to do in the recruiting portal this year, and what they're going to be able to do moving forward as well. Landon Barnes, do not underestimate this commitment to Ole Miss. This is absolutely huge for the future of Ole Miss, what Ole Miss is looking forward to do in the future, and what the plans they have in moving forward. Last year obviously was a undervalued year, and it did not go the way Ole Miss wanted. But this is still title town and title hopes for this coaching staff and for these players at Ole Miss. They have the mindset of winning a national championship, and they're going to continue developing, recruiting, and formatting their team around the players that they can fully adapt and develop in their system and have those reigns to hopefully win a national championship in the near future.
King on the Throne, we'll talk about that in just a second in the third segment. So we will answer that. But first, we do want to talk about recruiting for the first couple of segments is going on. The offense is going to change, but it's always going to be up tempo, by the way. Dalin, listen, the one recruit that is out there that Ole Miss fans should feel pretty good about, I think Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding feel good about, I think Randall Joyner feels good about, is Deuce Gerald's. It's another Ole Miss versus Ohio State battle. But if Deuce Gerald's was 3 inches taller, he'd be the number one player in America. That is how good he is. We saw him at the Under Armour All-American game. I saw him work out. I talked with the Florida football scout, Brian Smith, about it to him while he was going. And honestly, what they want to see in the All-Star games, I expect him to go to the Navy All-American Bowl this year, by the way. But what they want to see out of him is if a team runs gap scheme, a power with a pulling guard coming around, is he big enough to withstand that? I think Deuce Gerald's can do all that. He's an elite pass rusher. If he comes to Ole Miss with Landon Barnes, with Isaiah Williams, good luck trying to throw the football. It is pass rushers galore. But if Deuce Gerald's can stand up against the run, this might be the best defensive line class that Ole Miss has ever put together. Maybe Norman Hand and Tim Bowens, but overall, this is a top shelf freshman class.
Absolutely. It's definitely exciting to see us just be in the ranks with some of these guys. But Ohio State's struggling right now in terms of recruiting, especially on that defensive line. They've lost out on a couple of guys over the last 3 weeks that, I think a lot of Ohio State fans felt strongly that they were going to come to Ohio State, end up going to different schools, and this now includes Landon Barnes. I think Gerald is a guy that has the qualities to be a first-round NFL pick. And I think, like you said, the size is something that a little bit of people have been questioned about, scouts and reporters as well. But I think when you put these guys up with great talent on their side. You saw it this year with Ole Miss, what Princely Allen was able to do with Walter Nolan and Jared Ivey and JJ McGee's by his side. It builds the momentum and confidence for these players to be like, okay, my teammate's this good. He's working this hard. I want to work harder. I want to be better. I want to be as good as I possibly can be for myself, for my future, and for this team. So these guys being on the same page, hopefully with the commitment of Gerald, maybe soon for Ole Miss, it builds the confidence of the ability to develop these players, but as well, what Ole Miss truly can do with this staff, with these players as well, because this is huge for Ole Miss to understand that guys like this are now filling in the trenches for a team that I think a lot of people were kind of questionable. Can this defensive line be replicated of what we saw this past year? Can it happen again? It can't. This is a team that it has the abilities to fill these holes. And you got to remember, when you're in this conference, when you play in the SEC, that trench is big, and that trench is the most important part of the team. And Lane Kiffin, it was evident of that a couple years ago after the Georgia loss. That offensive line, defensive line, the trenches are huge. So to be able to compete as highly as Ole Miss is at this level, still on that defensive line and those trenches, is absolutely huge for the Rebels.
All right, when we come back, we'll get into the comment section, see if there's any good questions there. Just ask some random stuff before we get out of here. But Ole Miss got a commitment from elite pass rusher Landon Barnes from Duncanville High School in Texas. That is absolutely big. But stick around with your comments next. All right, we're going to close it out. Going to spend a couple of minutes talking about, there was a question a little bit early on. It says, will the offense be up tempo, and will Austin be under center more than past quarterbacks? Austin will not be under center. It will be up tempo, absolutely, but the offense is going to change. You can tell that by the number of tight end type bodies that they brought in the transfer portal. You can tell that by the type of player that Austin Simmons is and the way he processes stuff. You put all of that together, you're not going to have Ole Miss getting into a Jackson Dart to Trey Harris duck and chuck from time to time whenever goes on with Austin Simmons. I think Joe Judge taking more of a role with the quarterbacks, that tells you it's going to be a little bit more pro style, but I think it's going to be up tempo, and I think it's going to be out of the shotgun.
Yeah, I do too. I think what excites me about Austin Simmons within this offense, I know there's been a lot of moving pieces and a lot of guys that have come in now that are new, but his ability to already understand the system, since he's been here for a few years and he's already worked with Joe Judge for a few years, and they understand, they have a great relationship, that builds the momentum of what they're going to be able to do at all different levels for this offense. I think it's going to be something that's going to excite fans, but you're going to see a totality of competing at different levels that we haven't seen in the past few years for Ole Miss. Like Steven mentioned, the guys that tied in now, like Luke Has and Daquan Wright, they're going to give an ability and a little bit of difference of within this offense that Ole Miss has not seen when Jackson Dart was here. But I also think it's going to give the ability to have things like the run game be a little bit more powerful and confident moving forward for Ole Miss this year. I think those type players have the ability to bring different subjects to this offense that makes them more elite at a lot of different things, which is exciting. You don't want to be one-dimensional like Ole Miss kind of saw at certain points last year, but with Austin Simmons under the helm, with different guys at the receiving core, with different guys in the tight end room, this Ole Miss offense has the ability to do a lot of different things really, really good, which is going to confuse a lot of the defenses they see in 2025.
Ben Godwin put this question out. It says, is his offense going to be 12 personnel? And some of the time, it absolutely will be that some of the time. They have recruited that way. They've recruited tight end level bodies. Heck, tomorrow, J.C. Anderson, one of the top tight ends in the country, is likely going to commit, and the prediction is to Ole Miss. We talk about that as well. So we will see exactly how that goes. Steve Wiltfong is talking about a lot of tight end work, and in the red zone, in short yardage, it'll help out the offensive line. It'll help out the running back. And most importantly, it'll help out Austin Simmons.
Absolutely. I think One of the things that just was so infuriating for the Ole Miss offense for me this past year was the red zone offense, finishing the bottom half of the conference in 2024, 2025. And that's something that Ole Miss cannot allow to happen, in the future if they want to compete and be elite. This is an offense that has the ability to make plays and put up big numbers. But when you get in that 20-yard line box, you have to develop and commit to getting some type of points on the board. And Ole Miss really struggled with doing that in 2024. So the ability to get bigger guys in there, allow the middle of the field to be a little bit more open, or allow the post to become more open on the outside for tight ends is going to be huge for Ole Miss in the red zone, where they kind of struggled at last year.
JL Cramner with the question, how many 4 and 5 stars are a good benchmark for a class? Also, are we going to see more 3 stars get chances or on a team play a bigger role moving forward? I think I'll do this in reverse order. The 3 stars, if they can play, they play. Caden Lee was a 3-star. Quinshon Judkins was a 3-star. If they can play, they're going to get on the field. So once they always talk about they don't look at star rankings, Lane Kiffin really doesn't. How many 4 and 5-star players are a good benchmark? Once you get up to about 9, that's rarefied air for Ole Miss football. I think the 2016 class was up there. I think Hugh Freeze had a couple of classes like that. It dropped down a little bit after that. And before that, I think 8 or 9 is there. If this week goes like it's supposed to go, at the end of this week, they could have 7 or 8. And that's why we say this is different. This feels different.
It does feel different. This is, I think a lot of the outside world has put that asterisk on Lane Kiffin. You can win these games, you can recruit the transfer portal really hard, but those high school recruiting records have not been as subpar as if people would think Ole Miss could be able to do. These are unprecedented times right now, and this is not only going to be something that's uncommon for Ole Miss, but this is building what Ole Miss is going to continue to do in the future. This is going to be huge for Ole Miss to set the foundation for the next 4 or 5 years, and in terms of what they want to do in the recruiting process.
All right, so one more question before we get out of here. Jay Cannon asks, what do you think the O-line is going to look like this season? And that's kind of a loaded question, Jay, because not a lot of people know. I like the tackles that Ole Miss has. If Jaden Williams and Diego Pounds can stay healthy over the course of the season, you're fine at tackle. I like Patrick Kutas at the right guard position. I think the right guard is going to be a strength for Ole Miss moving forward. Bryson Sanders, it's his turn. I think it was J.L. Cramner talked about people getting their opportunity. He's going to get his opportunity. The question becomes, what are they going to do at left guard?
Yeah.
And I think over the course of the season, I think Devin Harper has a chance to make a little bit of noise. And Ole Miss hasn't had a top 100 level offensive lineman in like 5 years. Devin Harper is that. And also last year, I think they fell in love with getting big, and they may have gotten too big for the athleticism required to play the position. Yes. So I think they're going to slim down a little bit.
I agree with that last point. I think that, having big guys is cool when you get those recruits, 6'8", 275, but you also want to have the ability to have guys on your offensive line that move really well, that are able to adapt to a different defensive line and different defensive edge, especially with guys like you're going to see in the SEC. The O-line has, a few question marks this year. But I think John Garrison has the ability to put something together really good, and he's going to need to. I think another great point that Stephen made is the health ability of Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams. Those are two guys that have the ability and have shown the ability to be really good. But, Jaden missed basically the entire season last year. Diego Pounds dealt with a lot of different things last year, and it did at North Carolina as well at his previous school. But if those guys are healthy, they've been here, they understand what is asked for them, they can be really good on the outside. And I'm really excited about Bryson Sanders in the middle. I think he has really good high potential and a high upside. I just think, he's a really smart player. I just think he needs to get some game experience in, which he will obviously get this year. But, the offensive line, has a good upside, but we really won't know what we see until later parts of the fall for real.
All right, Dalin, tell everybody what you have going on over at the Rebel Walking on the Rebel or the Dalin Show.
Just been, working really hard. Just put out episode 13 on the Dalin Show. recording with Keith Carter this week, Thursday. So that should be coming out here soon. Super excited about that. Getting ready to go back to Oxford next week as well. So getting ready to hopefully be back in the room with the basketball team as they get ready to go within their summer press conferences, and getting back into football press conferences as well, understanding what the team is going to be looking like moving forward. There's obviously not much going around right now, but it's still a time to understand the in-depth of all the sports teams, whether it's the football, basketball, women's basketball, even the baseball team as well. So super fun time right now for me, working really hard, but I'm super excited about what the next 2 or 3 weeks is going to look like for me.
All right, Dalin, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next week, buddy.
All right, y'all. Howdy toddy.
Howdy toddy. All right. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most perspectives around. And do us a favor, if you would, like, comment, subscribe on this video. It helps keep the podcast free, and we want it to stay free and fun. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most knowledgeable fan on the rapid changes around college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means, do you know what it means? It means bad football. We'll talk to you later. Hotty toddy.